I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty podcasts for 3 stinking days.
Yeah! Why can't we have some new content? What about them? They're fresh.
They are not for eating.
That's right, Uglok. We are not for eating. This is Project Geekology. My name is Dakota, and I'm joined as always with...
Anthony. Okay, as soon as you started that, I started dying.
Okay.
I started laughing. I was prepared for it too. I was prepared. I was like, what is he going to start with this week? And of course.
Yeah, I had Anthony, I cut my audio and mic to practice my intro this week, just because I didn't want Anthony to get a sneak peek at some of the monstrosity that was going to happen. But we are talking The Two Towers today for episode 30 of Project Geekology.
The Two Towers.
The second film in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. Some people's favorite of the trilogy. It's certainly up there amongst them. There's only 3, so you don't have many choices. But how does this one rank for you?
I think I consider this one my favorite one. I like Return of the King a lot too, but I don't know. There's just something about the second one that it starts off pretty strong and it ends pretty strong.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a lot that happens in it that I really like. And there's a lot that, obviously there's a lot that sets up for the next movie. That's really cool. Yeah, it's hard because I really like The Two Towers and The Return of the King. But I would say, The Two Towers is probably my favorite of the 3.
I would say in terms of the one I like to watch the most is probably The Two Towers.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the most enjoyable from start to finish of the 3. They each have their pros and cons, so.
Right.
But we'll get into that in just a moment. Before we jump into our discussion of the first part of Two Towers, this is part 1. We're going to be stopping right around where the extended edition first disc ends. But before we start that, Anthony, what have you been up to this past week?
I don't know if it was the last podcast. I think I mentioned it. I had picked up another gacha game, the My Hero Academia Strongest Hero.
How's that going?
Well, I finally recruited one of the stronger heroes in the game, at least for right now. Momo Yayurazu.
I don't
Creation?
know who that is.
The girl with the creation quirk?
Yeah.
She's pretty cool because she has like 3 weapons. One is like a halberd. Another one is kind of like a double scythe. Like it looks like a scythe, but it has blades on 2 ends. The other one is like a really big shield.
Mm-hmm.
And she like summons turrets, which is like really cool. And then like summons like this really like big blaster gun. So I could see why she's one of the top ones. Another one being Aizawa.
Okay.
Eraserhead.
Cool. Yeah.
And of course, I think All Might is up there too. I mean, it makes sense. So yeah, I've been playing that. I watched the first half of The Two Towers last night again. I had watched it like a week ago, and then I watched the first half last night. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that I was fresh up on that. And I'm trying to think. I feel like there's something else. I always forget, Dakota. Never fails. Never fails.
Maybe something that I will say will jog your memory, but most likely not.
Hopefully. Enough about what I've been up to. How about you, Dakota? What have you been doing?
Well, right now, I'm sipping coffee and water intermittently because I might have blown my voice out with that introduction. So I'm trying to keep my composure there. But as far as what I've been up to this past week, same thing I've been up to for the past couple weeks is just consuming Star Wars content back to back to back to back. Bad Batch has been really good lately. I mean, it hasn't had any low points so far, but this past episode was good. They touched on the Zygerian Empire that kind of seized their opportunity to reinstate their slave trade once the Republic fell. So that's interesting. We met the Zygerians in Clone Wars, which, funny enough, Jen and I have been slowly watching through the Clone Wars over the past year or so. And just after watching the Bad Batch episode, we started the Zygerian arc in Clone Wars Season 4, which was a very good, I think it was a 3-episode arc, where we learn about the Zygerians and their slave trade thing. So that was a fascinating look at the galaxy far, far away. So I love how it's all starting to connect together into this one big puzzle, and we're starting to piece together more of the things that are happening in the wider scale. And I think that's what Bad Batch is going to probably do best. It'll give us a better look at how the galaxy changed immediately from the Republic era to the Empire era, and what Palpatine instated, and what these dissident clans and trades that wouldn't have thrived under the Republic, how they took over during this power vacuum. So it's kind of cool. But as far as outside of Bad Batch, I've been reading some comics. I reread Claudia Gray's Star Wars Bloodline. That's the one where Leia finds out about, or that's the one where the Senate that Leia was a part of, after the Empire fell, they discover that she is Darth Vader's daughter, and how that affects her political career.
Oh, yeah.
Hint, hint, doesn't go well. That's a good book. I actually think her Princess of Alderaan one was a little bit better, because I think the Bloodline one was supposed to tie into The Last Jedi and explain how the First Order came into power, but it didn't really explain it all that well, in my opinion. What else? Oh, and I read a really cool book. I just finished it on Friday, called Force Collector. And it takes place just before the sequel trilogy starts. And it's this kid who has this ability. It's called psychometry. He doesn't know what it's called, or he doesn't know that that's what it's called or anything. But it's the ability to touch an object and feel its history through a force vision.
Oh, okay.
We have had Jedis who've had that ability before or used it in some instance. We had Quinlan Voss back in the Clone Wars era. He was a psychometrist Jedi, as well as Rey touched Anakin and Luke's lightsaber back in The Force Awakens, and she got a vision of in Maz's castle. I forget what the vision was about, but it was their battle on one of the Death Stars, I think. We've seen a little bit of psychometry in the past, but it's this kid who basically is trying to learn the Force through these visions, and he's learning about this jumbled history of Jedi through these devices, and it's a really good read. It's not one of the best Star Wars books I've ever read or anything, but it's a fun read because you're learning from an outsider's perspective what the Star Wars galaxy looks like. So yeah. It's pretty cool. I recommend that one. And what else? Outside of Star Wars, kind of sick of talking about Star Wars. I watched Cruella last night.
Oh, did you? How was that?
It was okay. It was really okay.
So it wasn't bad, but it also wasn't good.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe a solid 6 or a 7. It was certainly a film.
Oh my gosh. And that's why I will wait until it releases.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy I ended up watching it with my in-laws because they bought it on their account. But, considering it was 4 of us watching, or 5 of us actually.
Right. So pretty much you got it for cheaper than if you were to watch it in the movies.
Correct. Yeah. Now, if it was just Jen and I watching the movie, it would be about as much as us going to the theaters, minus gas and whatever snacks that we buy there. But
yeah,
it was good. I enjoyed it for what it was worth. I don't necessarily recommend buying it unless you're a big Dalmatians, 101 Dalmatians fan. But even then, I'm kind of confused about the way that it ended.
So tell me a little bit about, obviously not too much about the plot, but more along the lines of what is that movie supposed to be? What is it exactly?
Yeah, so if you didn't already gather, Cruella is the story of the primary antagonist of the 101 Dalmatians, Cruella de Vil, and her origin story. It's how she went from a child to an adult, the strides that she had to take, and the things that it took to break her to make her what she is in 101 Dalmatians, if that makes any sense. It's kind of like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker from a couple years back. But it's not that crazy. It kind of has you like sympathize for the character. So it's kind of a weird balance of, you know, is this person actually bad? And I'm still kind of confused how she got from there to killing puppies in 101 Dalmatians, you know?
And not just killing them, but wearing them.
Well, yes, killing and wearing them.
So this is like Disney's attempt at trying to make their own Joker?
It might be more of like, you know, the play Wicked, where it was like the Wicked Witch of the West, and they kind of like made her a more sympathetic figure. I think it's more that than Joker, but you know, Joker's more recent, so it's kind of an easier comparison.
So yeah, I've noticed that they have been doing, they kind of started that with Maleficent, where they're trying to make these like origin stories for their villains. Yeah, and
I haven't watched Maleficent, so I don't know too much about that one, but I assume that's what it is doing. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So that's what I've been up to. Did you remember anything about what you missed from this past week?
Of course not.
Of course not. Naturally.
Naturally. And then I'll remember sometime later today or tomorrow.
Naturally.
That's just...
That's the way it goes. All right. Anthony, you want to get us started with our discussion of the Two Towers?
Do I, Dakota? Do I really? We start back in the Mines of Moria.
Or just outside of it, actually. It's kind of an interesting shot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, Gandalf is pretty loud if you can hear him from outside a mountain.
Right? Yeah, his voice certainly booms. I mean, Ian McKellen's got a great voice, but, you know, Gandalf's magic probably amplifies it. And it was just such a cool opening. You know, you have this kind of like serene look above the mountaintops, some helicopter footage of some New Zealand Alps. And then you kind of like zoom in really quick onto a thing, but in the background you kind of hear Gandalf's voice when he's fighting the Balrog. Flame of Odin.
The dark fire will not avail you. Yeah. You hear the voice lines from the Fellowship of the Ring, and yeah, it zooms into the mountain and it shows him fighting the Balrog towards the end of the fight, where the Balrog falls and takes Gandalf down with him. But instead of the camera following the Fellowship, it follows what happened to Gandalf afterwards.
Which is so cool, because as a kid, being in the theater, I don't know if you remember this, the feeling you got when you first watched this, but it was kind of like, first of all, it was cool because you're starting with action. You know, the movie's starting with the bang. Right. And then you're like, oh, but we have to watch Gandalf die again. And up to that point, I had only ever read The Fellowship. So I assumed Gandalf was dead. You know? I hadn't read Into the Two Towers or anything. I didn't know that he was going to turn into anything. So I was just like, oh, we got to watch this guy die again. But then the camera follows him down this shaft, that's this endless shaft down into the deeps, and wow, what a crazy I never expected to see Gandalf fighting this giant like behemoth with a sword and a staff down this thing, just riding his horns, and you know, it's such a cool scene.
And when he catches his sword in like midair and just like rides it down, like he goes down with it and attacks the Balrog. Yeah, I kind of like that sound it makes. It's kind of making a sound against the wind, and when he grabs it, it makes. I don't know if you remember
the sword going down.
Yeah.
Like the yeah. I know what you mean. It's a very cool. The sound design again is crazy in this movie.
But yeah, that fight between him and the Balrog is really cool
and unexpected.
And then that thing is so deep, and then they fall into this area. It's like a massive like cavern. Mm-hmm. They like hit the floor, but then Frodo wakes up, and it was Frodo having a dream.
Yeah, so Frodo wakes up. They're in like this craggy, arid landscape where they're trying to traverse it. They're trying to get down to Mordor,
right?
And they have no idea what they're doing. They have a general path that they plan on going down, but because you're in a mountainous region, and because you're not always looking out at the horizon, it's pretty easy to start traversing in circles, especially if you're not used to the landscape, So, and that's exactly what they do. There's some really cool moments in this early part of the film, especially with Sam and Frodo, that are worth talking about, that exist in the extended edition that don't exist in like the normal edition, like the Elven Rope.
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hate talking.
Do you love talking about any topic and are never frustrated during conversations? Then I Hate Talking is not a podcast for you.
But if there are topics that you avoid, then listen to I Hate Talking.
Do you know the definition of every word others use? I Hate Talking is not a podcast for you.
But if you are curious about the definition and historical usage of words, then listen to I Hate Talking.
Do you know about current events and other random topics? Then I Hate Talking is not a podcast for you.
But if you enjoy conversations on a variety of topics, then listen to I Hate Talking.
Listen to I Hate Talking wherever you get your podcasts.
Episodes drop every Thursday. Listen, like, and follow I Hate Talking today.
Oh yeah, that's a nice humorous moment too. They climb down, and then Sam, like a little box falls out of his pocket, and Frodo is further down the rope than Sam. Like Sam's like, catch it, and then so like Frodo catches it, but then he slides down the rope, and they weren't that far from he wasn't that far from the bottom. Frodo's like, oh, I found the bottom. And, Sam gets down there, and they find out that, or Frodo, like, kind of opens it up, and it's salt. And he's like,
what is this?
It's the best salt in all the Shire.
And this is one of the only, like, moments in the film where they have the Shire theme playing. And it just kind of goes to show, like, how good of a composer Howard Shore is, because he made, like, 70 or 80 different, like, little motifs or leitmotifs that he's sprinkled throughout the film, or films, plural, and to give you like little feels of certain different times or different points or different friendships. And in this case, the Shire theme that we hear in the beginning of Fellowship is reiterated here again, just to give you that homey feeling right before it goes downhill.
Right, and it kind of like establishes that they're homesick, because Frodo goes on to say that it is special because it's a little bit of home.
Yeah,
it's funny though, because I like Sam. He's like, oh, you don't know if we're gonna have a roast chicken, and then Frodo's just like, roast chicken.
I know, and at that point you think you can kind of just like see that there's no animals in this area for them to roast by any means.
Right.
They have nothing but lembas bread. And
oh, dude, I love that. Oh my gosh, that moment where they go to eat.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, oh, so what do we have to eat? Oh, let me check. Lembas bread. Oh, and look, more lembas bread.
It's the way that Sean Astin says more lembas bread.
I know.
Gets me every time.
Yeah. He. It's really good. The Elven Rope thing was funny too, because they climb down, and he's like, oh, it's a shame that they want to get Frodo said that we should get rid of it so nobody follows us, and he's like, oh, it's not gonna come down in a hurry, it's one of my knots. And he's like, oh, it's a shame, Lady Galadriel gave it to me, real elvish rope. and then Frodo tugs it, and then it like unravels.
Yeah.
Like, so in my mind, I'm like, is that the magic of the elves, or is that just poor tying? I think it was the magic of the elves, right?
Oh, it has to be. Yeah, that's the intent of the film, is that these items that Galadriel gave them are enchanted to, I guess, kind of obey your will. Like when you don't want the knot to fail, it doesn't fail. But the moment that you just quite like simply like tug on it, it's almost like a
It's a quick release.
Yeah, it's like, you know when you're in a car and you have the seatbelt on and you like pull yourself forward and the seatbelt like tugs on you.
Yeah.
And then like you like slowly release it, or you slowly release the your weight and like the seatbelt loosens up. That's kind of how it looks to me like it would feel. And then, you know, the whole knot unravels and it comes crumbling down at their feet. I love the look on Sam's face, like he wasn't sure if that was the elven magic or if he had tied it poorly, and you could tell.
I know he was a little like, oh crap, we could have fallen. Because they were both on that rope too. But I always chalked it up to like the elven magic.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was a funny little humorous moment along with the Shire salt.
Yeah. What's going to be difficult in our recounting of this is the fact that the point of view changes a couple times throughout this film. And I don't think we're going to be like chronologically like going along as the point of views change. So bear with us. But I will say that it is good that they introduce Gollum so quickly in this movie. I mean, we saw a little bit of him in the Fellowship of the Ring. I think there's 2 scenes in the extended edition that feature, you know, Gollum kind of following the Fellowship.
Right. They do. And Gandalf says something about him.
Right. Frodo says something along the lines of, like, I wish, like, basically, like, I pity him. I wish Bilbo would have, like, stabbed him or something. You know, like, took his life.
Right, killed him. And Gandalf said it was essentially along the lines of, it was pity that stayed his blade.
Yeah, and he kind of, like, makes the thing, like, can you deliver life and death so easily to another being, to another creature?
Right, and you see how quickly Frodo changes his tune when they actually do meet him, which that moment always like makes me laugh because he's trying to sneak up on them. I'm like, dude, you are talking so loud right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's got mental problems, clearly.
Right. I mean, he's got like the double personality.
Right.
He has Gollum, and then there's Smeagol.
Yes. And, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think as soon as Frodo starts to call him Smeagol, that personality becomes the dominant one, versus Gollum, which has been the dominant one for, you know, who knows how many hundreds of years. Right.
Gollum is like he's like the savage side of Smeagol. And, right. I mean, yeah, and I mean, this happens a little bit like later in the film. I think this happens. Does it happen in the first half or the second half? I don't remember seeing it in the second half where he calls him Smeagol, and he's like kind of overcome by hearing that name.
It is the first half of the movie. Yeah, it's the first half when they're in the marshes and stuff. So
yes,
yeah. So we'll get onto that in a little bit. It was that like introduction to Gollum where he's climbing down the mountainside and he's like talking about, you know, my precious and stuff. It was either that or the orcs talking about maggoty bread that I was like debating whether or not which one to to do for our intro today. I think I chose wisely.
Yeah, I think you did. Oh my gosh. I started laughing at the meats back on the menu because it reminded me of that situation a few months ago. Remember?
You got to reiterate that to our audience.
Okay. When we get to that moment,
all right. Yeah.
What is it? I'll.
All right. So Frodo and Sam, they're pretending to sleep. They know this guy's following them. He's really loud. He's a mouth breather for sure. And
he really is, and you can hear him wheezing too.
Item.
He's like,
yes, and so they kind of take him. He puts up a good fight. He's really disgusting, and he bites Sam. Dude, when I saw that, I was like, oh man, Sam's gonna turn into a golem.
I know, right?
Like a zombie bite or
like
something.
a zombie, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't. I don't know that he even breaks the skin because he bites like through the elvish cloak. What's interesting is when they finally capture him and they tie the elvish rope around him, he's complaining that the cord is burning him, or that it's freezing him. And I think it's like almost like that freezing hot pain that is we sometimes feel like maybe when we touch ice or whatever. But it's interesting that it was because the elves made it, and he goes, filthy elves made it or something like that. And it's again the power of this rope, these enchanted items that they were given, that is what's causing him pain, because as soon as it's used as a noose, it's a torture device, or a leash. I don't want to say a noose, but yeah, it either way, it's around his neck and it's burning him.
It's a lasso of truth.
It is a little bit of a lasso of truth, and it just kind of goes to show like how powerful these items that Galadriel gave them were. And when Sam, I think we talked about this last week, but when Sam asked, everyone's getting these cool little daggers, can I get something? And something like that, and Galadriel just kind of like smiles at him and like walks away. It just goes to show how actually powerful the rope that she gave him was, and it comes in handy several times. But yeah, so Sam does not trust him. Frodo is willing to trust him because he knows the way to Mordor where they don't, so he allows him off the leash for a little bit so that they can follow him through the quickest path, basically, to the Black Gate.
Right, and even as he's moving along, he's talking to himself, and he really does not want to go back to Mordor. Like, even it's crazy how much like it's common knowledge, or at least amongst the people that you interact with throughout the movies, that they know that this ring wants to get back to Sauron.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think this is something that they kind of embellished in the movie to make it a more interesting thing. Like, I don't think that there was an eye of Sauron in the books or anything like that. But they definitely embellished the power of the ring and the hold that the ring has on people, and the pull towards evil and to Sauron that it has. I like the fact that Gollum also realizes that that's what Sauron wants.
Yeah. So yeah, Gollum leads Frodo and Sam out of that area that they're in, the
craggy rocks.
Craggy rocks, and brings them into a marsh. And Sam starts to realize that there are dead people in the water, and it's their spirits. So yeah, he says that they're called the Dead Marshes. It's really crazy, like how knowledgeable Gollum is.
Right.
He might be this. He's a really like knowledgeable being for being this like savage, ugly-looking creature. He really is useful.
Yeah. Great battle long ago. Yeah, he's actually a very good guide when he's not trying to lead them to their doom.
Right.
But at this point, yeah, he's showing them the quickest way to the Black Gate instead of going miles and miles outside of their way to get to the Dead Marshes, because the orcs don't use it. The orcs don't know it, but there is a way to get through the dead marshes on foot. You know, it's not an easy one, and it's kind of a gross, disgusting, stinky one, but it is a way for them to get there. What's interesting is if you look at the costumes of the dead people in the water in this scene, it's the same like attire, even like the elves and stuff that they faced back 3,000 years ago when the last battle of men and elves fought Sauron in front of Mordor. That's where all those bodies came from.
Right. And I remember looking up that battle, and yeah, that battle took place during that time.
Yeah.
Gollum tells them to not follow the lights, and it's these little flames that kind of mark off a path a little bit, and the ring kind of influences Frodo a little bit, and so Frodo follows the lights, and he stares into the water at this dead elf.
Yeah. And
the eyes open, and he falls in.
Which is such a creepy scene.
It really is a creepy scene. And didn't you have like a moment with your grandfather?
Yeah, my grandfather and I he took me to the movies. I remember back in Florida, we went to the falls for a matinee showing of The Two Towers. And I remember he grabbed my wrist so quick when the eyes opened up and Frodo fell into the water, and there was all those ghostly apparitions trying to grab him in the water, which is kind of cool because it doesn't look deep when Frodo is looking at the water because the body seems to be maybe a foot underneath the water. But as soon as he falls in, there is no body. It's just, the spirits of the dead, basically.
Right. Yeah, that was creepy. They're green and stuff. It kind of reminds me of the ghosts from the Haunted Mansion. They're all green and stuff.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, yeah.
And so yeah, they're kind of surrounding Frodo while he's in the water, and all of a sudden you see a hand reach him and pull him back. And when you're younger, you're like, oh crap, what happened? And it was Gollum pulling him out of the water.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, don't follow the lights.
You're right.
Yeah. So I always assumed you must have interpreted that scene a little bit differently, where the lights were you assumed that the lights were the fire that was leading to that point. I never noticed that. I'll have to rewatch that and check that out again. I always interpreted the lights as when they open their eyes, they're kind of glowing a little bit, and those are the lights that Frodo falls and follows into the water. I might be wrong though.
That might factor into it also.
Maybe. I don't know. I have to watch that again. I interpreted that scene differently than you did, but either way, same end goal. He's not supposed to go into the water.
I mean, it is pretty crazy though. I mean, there's fire kind of marking a path.
Right.
And that's fire that's been there for probably that's fire that's probably been there for 3,000 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. Was there no fire anywhere else in the Dead Marshes? I didn't notice. I have to rewatch that scene again because I don't recall.
There might have been some spread out here and there, but the one that was really focused was the path that Frodo went down.
Interesting. Okay.
Because you see Frodo kind of diverge off from the group.
Yeah. Well, anyone listening, email us or tweet us. Let us know your thoughts on that because that's interesting. So anyway, while they're in the Dead Marshes, they get out of that little thing. Frodo and Gollum have some meaningful conversation about, Smeagol's past, and that it's worth talking about because it's something that is developed in the next film. We learn about how Frodo has some knowledge that Smeagol, or that Gollum was Smeagol before he was ever Gollum, and that he wasn't much different from a hobbit.
Right, that he was a river folk.
Yeah, which I guess, according to Tolkien mythology, is that they're just distant cousins or whatever. I don't even know if the river folk still exist or if they evolved into hobbits in this world or what, but they are very close genetically. before he took the ring, obviously. What's interesting about that scene is that while Frodo is trying to reach out to Smeagol like quotes several different hymns or riddles or poems that he clearly remembered from back in like his time as a riverfolk.
Right, that was a long time ago too for Gollum.
Yeah, 500
he had,
or maybe 450 years or something like that.
Yeah, a long time.
That's a long time. Yeah, it's an interesting moment.
And it seems like, I don't know if you noticed, but when he was doing that, it was almost like he was singing those to like comfort himself.
Yeah, because he was kind of like, he's in his Gollum position, like where he's like kind of like crumpled onto the ground and leaning on himself a little bit. But it was almost like a comfort thing. You're right. It looked like he was out of his comfort zone, and the fact that Frodo was trying to break through his walls, it seemed like he was trying to, kind of stay in his own head. But it wasn't until he said Smeagol that Frodo kind of really did actually break through to him, and he's just like, "What did you call me?"
Right. Like you could kind of see like the memory kind of filling him a little bit, and he's like, wow, like he hadn't heard that name in so long. Yeah,
it's a nice scene, and it's where there's a clear shift in who we perceive Gollum to be, and where he where he is different after that point, because he is remembered for who he was instead of who he is, and he wants at least deep down to be that person still, and I think he tries.
Yeah.
We don't have in this section of the movie, we don't have that fantastic scene of him talking to himself, like back and forth, like leave and never come back. We'll discuss that next week. But
that was really confusing as a kid.
It was, but it was also funny.
Yeah.
It's a good scene. It's a good scene.
But yeah, no, we'll talk about that more next week.
Speaking of Gollum, while we're still like on that topic, what fantastic CGI for the time being. That was one of the first real motion capture performances, and Andy Serkis, first of all, killed it, but the entire team, the Peter Jackson's team with the CGI, just a whole new level of realism when it comes to computer generated imagery.
I know George Lucas should have been talking to him.
I'm sure they did have a couple conversations after that, because I think just before this, the first motion capture stuff was done on The Phantom Menace with Jar Jar Binks and stuff. I might be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure Jar Jar was the first motion capture CGI.
So the motion capture itself wasn't that bad. It was just the CG that just looks bad. And
you're talking about Jar Jar. Oh yeah. I think, and props to George Lucas for what he did back then. And we talked about this in our Phantom Menace episode, but he really opened up the possibilities of CGI and digital filmmaking in general, which I'm pretty, Lord of the Rings is filmed on film and not on like a digital format, and it shows. After this point, stuff started more frequently being filmed on digital cameras. But yeah, fantastic CGI. Almost 20 years later, this film still very much holds up. It's absolutely insane. And I thought about that a lot. Like, what needed to happen for these films to why does the CGI still look so good? And there's like a couple schools of thought. One is motion blur and shadows. If you really pause on any one scene of the Balrog back in Fellowship, there's no clear look at him. Like every scene that you cut to is a little bit blurry, is a little bit in shadow or whatever, or like masked in flame or whatever. I think that's a tool that needs to be reincorporated into movies nowadays, because your average shot is kind of a little bit blurry. But when it's played outright, our minds trick ourselves into seeing something grander. And I think that modern CGI tries to make every single frame look super clear. And that's part of the problem with The Hobbit, is that everything looks so clear that it stops looking real. And that's something that they nailed in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, is that. But also the fact that, you know, nowadays movies require so much CGI, and there's so many movies that require CGI, that artists and computer artists, they no longer have the time to devote to certain scenes or certain projects that they would have back then. So it's a number of things, but either way, Gollum is just a fantastic use of CGI.
Yeah. So while they're traversing through the dead marshes, the ring wraiths start flying overhead on, they're called felled beasts.
Mm-hmm. They're basically like small dragons.
Right. They look like really creepy. They're like wyverns.
Yeah.
So yeah, they.
Who is it that says that they thought that they were dead? Was it Sam or Frodo?
I think it was Sam.
Which is weird because he wasn't present when Arwen attacked them with the water. It was just Frodo that was present. But you know, Frodo wasn't.
Or it might have been
conscious.
Frodo. It might have been Frodo.
Maybe. Yeah. I remember Sam also, but I might be wrong. Yeah, you know, Gollum kind of scoffs at the idea that dead? No, you can't kill them. Basically suggesting that they're already dead. You can't kill what's dead. But
right.
They did get a massive upgrade in terms of, instead of horses, now they're on wings.
Right. Essentially, they're like, nah, man, screw this, we're flying. It's like, I'm tired of riding around on horses, you know.
They would have made it to the Shire so much quicker.
People, you know, throwing water at us, you know, making, you know, what Arwen did, making the water rush against them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they got a massive upgrade. And then they like hid under this, Frodo, Sam, and Gollum. They hid under this like little tree that came out of nowhere, because I don't think I really saw any trees in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they definitely found like the one hiding space like that was available to them, but it was just
the
kind
one
of like
obvious hiding space.
It was kind of a very cool moment, because you expect them to be dead, like the audience, you expect them to be like done away with, but you hear that like shrill, high-pitched scream that they have, and you're like, oh man, not these guys again. And then you see them on wings, and kind of Gollum is there to like reiterate like what the audience is thinking, wraiths on wings. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. And obviously we will experience more of them in the rest of the trilogy.
Right. So yeah, the ring wraith passes over. They're safe, and they leave the dead marshes.
Yes, they finally make it up to like just in front of the Black Gate. And by the way, we're you know, just going ahead and talking about all the happenings of Frodo and Sam in this first half of the movie, just because their story is so much more different than the rest of the fellowships. So
Right.
They make it up to the Black Gate, and Frodo's just like, he's here, he's ready, you know, nothing's gonna stop him, even though he has absolutely zero plan. The Elvish cloaks will help them in like hiding and stuff, but in terms of like an army of millions of orcs, the Elvish cloaks don't have that kind of power, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, that's crazy. And then the Black Gates open up to like a company of Haradrim.
Right, which are like, are they Easterlings or right? Yeah. I guess just people from the East that are siding with Sauron for whatever purpose or whatever Sauron has, you know, like promised them of Middle Earth. And it's opening up to let this company in and Frodo is jumping on he's jumping on the opportunity to like jump into Mordor through the Black Gate. And that's when, as intelligent of a guide as Gollum is, or Smeagol is, he didn't ask himself why we were headed to the Black Gate.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, well, like right before they go to run in there's like a really cool moment where like Sam, he falls over the cliff, like on this rock.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for some reason, I just don't understand how he ended up like chest deep in these like rocks.
Well, if he started an avalanche and like the rocks kind of like fell into place around him, then I guess it's possible. I mean, it's not impossible. It's just an improbable thing from what we saw.
Right. I mean, maybe like, I don't know, like maybe he would have been like covered a little bit, but like, I mean, he like was like straight, he fell face forward, but ended up like standing.
Yes. And then the rocks around him like piled up to about waist deep. Yeah.
No, but like there's like a really cool moment though, where Frodo goes down and covers him with the elvish cloak. And I thought that was so cool. It is. As a kid, I was like, wait, where did they go? Like, I was like looking for the, like the green cloak. I was, as a kid, you're thinking, like, what is that going to do? And then when he like raises it and it looked like a rock, I was like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think, knowing that it's a rock in like post viewings or like secondary or third viewings, you realize that it's not that great of a cover as you would have originally imagined, because you can tell it's not a rock. It's just like a sheet of something. But
right. If you look closely, you could tell that it's not formed. Like it looks like a rock, but it's not completely formed. It looks like fabric.
Yeah, so it even changes color a little bit. It's no longer the green that it was.
Right. It has like that gray.
Again, the properties of the elvish cloak become apparent. The Haradrim don't notice that there are any humans there, even though they go to check it out. And what's crazy is that they could have very easily have seen Frodo before he had done that, because they were already on their way over there. But the elvish cloak clearly has some mirage type qualities that unwanted eyes have a very hard time seeing you. And we see more of that later on in the film too, not just with Frodo and Sam. But so they end up not going into Mordor through the Black Gate. First of all, the Black Gate, how cool is that? Like, first of all, just the name, the Black Gate, is like so fantasy, and like
it really is.
It's so good. And then the fact that they like have enslaved giant trolls to
open it, right? That's so crazy.
It's a cool mechanism.
It is, and it goes to show you like how heavy they are.
Right, like how big those massive, looks like iron doors are.
Right, I don't think you're going to be taking any battering rams to that thing.
Right.
I don't even think that the Grand would be able to open that. Which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could see like how fearful Gollum is, though. Like, I mean, he stops them and he's like, "Don't take the ring back to him." Just like he knows like that it will be. He wants the ring for himself, and he knows. So Gollum, I know he realizes that the ring is bad. It's just he has like that. He's like a junkie looking for his his next hit. He does realize like that it's bad, to the point to where it's like, you do not bring the ring back to him. Don't do it. He knows that bad things will happen. Yeah,
he knows that the entire world will change in an instant if Sauron gets that ring back. He'll come back to power like he was back 3,000 years ago or so. So it is very clear that Gollum does not want them to go that way. You could see the fear in his eyes, and he's pleading, and Frodo keeps like trying to like No, I'm gonna go. And then Gollum's like, there's another way, upstairs, through tunnel. And at this point, still, I don't find that he is malicious. You know?
Right.
He's not trying to do away with the hobbits. He is trying to help them get to where they need to go. He doesn't know that they're trying to destroy the ring or anything like that. But he's not trying to kill the hobbits in any way, shape, or form. So I wonder what his original plan was, taking it through Shelob, which we'll talk about later on down the line. But I don't think that he would have left Frodo and Sam to die.
Yeah, that is interesting now that you bring it up, because I do think that, in his mind he knew that Shelob, and stuff, and whatever else is up there that we'll talk about later on, maybe he had other ways to get around it.
Yeah, I mean, well, clearly he got through the tunnel safely.
Right.
So he knew the way. It was just Frodo who didn't know the way and ended up having to, face off against Shelob. And Sam got through as well. Because he went back to... Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's jump back.
We're ahead of ourselves.
Right.
So let's jump back. Gollum decides to now take them down another path.
Yeah, so let's table our discussion of... Actually, no. We'll really quickly just wrap up our discussion with Frodo and Sam with the very happy Gollum who brings Frodo and Sam a brace of conies. Some rabbits. And he starts freaking out because Sam starts cooking them. What are you doing? And he starts talking about taters.
Oh yeah, he's like, there's only one way to eat or prepare a brace of conies, and then he's cooking it in a stew, and then you hear Gollum just complaining.
Yeah,
he's
just
you're messing this up.
You're ruining a good thing. And
what are taters, precious?
Yeah.
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
It's even you can't say no to that. It's like, oh yes, we could.
And we'll cover the rest of what happens to Frodo, Sam, and Gollum in our next chapter.
Yes,
because I think that's where the disc 1 ends, right at that moment. So we'll jump our discussion back a little bit, but to another point of view, which is Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli chasing down the orcs that have taken Merry and Pippin and are bringing them to Saruman at Isengard.
Yes, they're hot in their trail, but I mean they are pretty. When you think about it, I think that they're 2 days away from them, which is pretty far. Yeah, the orcs have a serious head start, but they're quickly gaining pace. I know, and to think that they, for the most part, I'm assuming that they do stop to rest for periods of time, but they must. Yeah, I mean, when they're not resting, they're running the whole time. I can't imagine running miles and miles and miles for hours. You see, Gimli's he's lagging wasted behind. On cross country. we are natural sprinters. Yeah, very dangerous in short sprints or something like that. Short distances. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's funny. But yeah, there's a moment where the orcs stop and they need a breather, right? Because they've been running like crazy too. Is Merry really injured, or is he really playing? Well, he says it was just an act. But then he looks kind of out of it though too. Well, I mean, they shoved whatever syrupy. I know that looks substance. Disgusting. It looks like they just shoved corn syrup into his mouth or something. Merry, or Pippin's my friend is sick. Give him some water. He's like, oh no, he's like, he needs medicine. He's like, give him some medicine. Oh, and then the orc guy is like, he needs some medicine. Give him some medicine, boys. And then the nasty syrupy looking stuff is like, oh, can't take his drought. Right. What exactly is that drought?
And
I know, like it looks like nasty stagnant water from a swamp.
Do orcs not need water like humans and elves do? Because they've like changed their makeup so much over the years, like their genetic structure. Like, is that what they need? Is that their water? I don't know. The world may never know.
I know, that was like some disgusting stuff.
Yeah. It looked like corn syrup. Like just very thick liquid.
That probably is what it was.
Yeah.
They meet up with orcs from Mordor.
Yeah.
And they smell Aragorn.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like crazy, because I think that they were like which goes to show like how strong their sense of smell is.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were still like pretty far away.
Yeah. They were like less than a day's journey, but still, that's miles and miles.
Right. That's miles and miles. And the fact that Aragorn can hear them on the ground.
Right. And Legolas can see them with his elf eye.
Their pace is quickened. They have caught our scent. And then they start like running. Pippin pulls off the pen.
Right. The Leaf of Lorien.
I like that line that Aragorn says when he sees it on the ground.
Not idly do the leaves of Lorien fall. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great line. Yeah, it's a great line.
Yeah.
There's so many great lines in this movie specifically. Yeah. We'll talk about more great lines in a little bit, but they end up following the orcs into the realm of Rohan. One of the cool scenes, again, another scene where their elvish cloaks come in handy, is when they see the horse people. They see the riders of Rohan coming up over the hill, and they go to hide, but the riders of Rohan don't see them. And it's like, wait, how on earth did they not see them? Because they were literally right in front of them. And it has to be, and they never explain it, but it has to be the cloaks, because that's the only reasonable answer outside of like a clear plot hole. But they end up realizing what's happening in Rohan. And previously to this, we did get glimpses of what's happening in Rohan, specifically the city of Edoras, where King Theoden is being poisoned mentally to the I guess the sorcerer Grima Wormtongue. Right.
Like Grima is essentially a medium for Saruman.
Yes. Yeah, it's an interesting little symbiotic relationship that he's developed with Saruman that will sap the life and strength and power of Rohan towards Saruman's will, basically. And you kind of just at first you're like, what the heck is wrong with this king? He just somebody take him off the throne. What is his deal? We soon learn that he is clearly just in a stupid haze, basically. Like, he is knocked out. He's unconscious.
Right.
He doesn't even realize that his son is dying in the room right next door.
So pretty much the real Theoden is pushed back to the recesses of his mind, and it's Saruman that's controlled him. And when Saruman isn't controlling him, he's kind of like a puppet, really.
Yeah, he's a puppet king, and that's exactly what's happening in these scenes. And so going back to the Rohirrim, who were like kicked out of Rohan, and they're just trying to do whatever they do. I don't know where they're going. They're just going for a ride with the boys. They're kind of like the fantasy version of like a biker gang, you know? They no longer feel welcome in Rohan. Clearly, they've been banished. And, you know, their leader, I forget his name, he basically says, you know, Theoden King no longer recognizes friend from foe. And that's why, you know, not even his own kin, as he takes his helmet off. But it's interesting how uncommon it is for a man, an elf, and a dwarf to be together, because that's the first thing that he comments on. Is like, now, what business do an elf, a man, and a dwarf have to be walking around in this area? And that's when, you know, they tell this guy that they're looking for Merry and Pippin. that they're following two hobbits. They would look like no more than child in your eyes.
Yeah.
And they're taken by some orcs.
Aemir says
Aemir,
the orcs.
yeah, that's right.
The orcs were destroyed.
Yeah, and
we left none alive.
He points them out, and
They're
again,
like
there's
burning in the distance.
so many great lines in this movie. There's so many great lines, especially because previously, and it's really hard to chronologically talk about this film because there's so many jump cuts. So we're kind of talking about certain things out of order, like what happened to Merry and Pippin the night before. But in the morning of the next day, Legolas goes, "A red sun rises. Blood has been spilt this night." I love that line, and every now and then I think about that whenever a red sun rises.
Right. Yeah, that was beforehand.
Yeah, so we're talking about certain things out of order, so I do apologize, just because it's so hard to keep track of like the point of view changes of the different things, because the individual point of view things occur so smoothly. You can talk about one point of view pretty smoothly throughout the course of the story and forget certain jump cuts to other characters. So previously we find that the orcs needed a breather, so they stopped for the night. They're looking for something different than maggoty bread, which they've been eating for 3 stinking days. We assume that means that they've been running out of Amon Hen with Merry and Pippin for 3 days straight.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, because that means that, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have also been running towards them for 3 stinking days. And
what have they been eating?
lambas bread.
Oh, true. Like a little bite.
And look, more lambas bread. The encampment happens to be on the edges of Fangorn Forest, which we'll learn more about in a second. So anyway, some huge fight breaks out between the orcs and the goblins. Or not, are they orcs? No, the orcs and the Uruk-hai, because they're trying to eat some of the some pieces off of the hobbits, because they're supposed to be bringing them back to Isengard alive, because they have some elvish weapon, supposedly. What about their legs? They don't need those. First, when I first watched the movie, I heard eggs instead of legs. I'm like, why do they have eggs?
And so yeah, one of the orcs tries to like sneak up, or one of the Mordor orcs tries to sneak up and take a little piece off of one of the hobbits.
Just a mouthful. A bit on the flank.
And then and then one of the Uruk-hai like cut off his head.
Yeah.
And then like one of the best lines in the movie. Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. And then they all just like roar in excitement.
Okay, so you have to talk about that interaction you had on Instagram a couple of months back.
Right. So Jen, Dakota's wife, she had Instagram story, something with Lord of the Rings, that would prompt me to put a gif of that scene. Looks like meat's back on the menu, and for some reason it didn't post on that story post for Jen's. It posted on somebody else's story, like the next story. And so that story was a picture of a dog. So it made me look like I was saying, looks like meat's back on the menu to a dog. About a dog.
Yo, I hope she blocked you. That's so funny. Did she ever respond?
No.
Good.
No,
Good.
Because shortly after I said, oops, wrong post.
That's hilarious. That is one of the funniest things. Imagine you post a picture of your dog and someone says, looks like meat's back on the menu. Oh man, that's gold. Anyway, so yeah, the orcs fight it out, but there's one orc in particular who doesn't want to let Merry and Pippin go, so he chases them into the forest. But before he gets that opportunity, the Rohirrim, the Riders of Rohan, they attack the orc encampment, because now they're on Rohan ground. or I forget what they call that area. It's like the Riddermark or something like that. But they kill all the orcs except for the one that ends up chasing Merry and Pippin into Fangorn Forest, and that's where we, wake up the next day. Red Sun, blood has been spilt this night, and the Rohirrim point out where Merry and Pippin were potentially burned because they left none alive.
And so like Aragorn and company go over there to check it out, and everything is burned. They see one of their belts, which I think it was Merry's belt.
I forget whose belt it was, but it was one of their belts. Like basically, the orc in question that was chasing them ripped it off of them, and that
right.
They put all the stuff on like this burial pile this pyre where they were burning everything. So the belt was all scorched up, and Gimli was like, one of the little belts.
Yeah, and so during this moment, or well, actually right before this, and I'm not sure if you ever read this, but Aragorn, he like kicks the helmet and he like screams.
Yeah.
So it made it seem like he was screaming out of grief, but he was actually screaming out of agony.
Yeah, he broke his toe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard that, and my wife brings it up every time that scene turns on.
Right. When I was watching that scene yesterday, I was like, "Oh man, you poor man."
Yeah, but it works great for the film.
Right. It's really crazy. And so yeah, he starts doing some detective work, and while he's doing his detective work, it shows glimpses of the battle from the night before, and it shows the hobbits kind of like bobbing and weaving through horses and people fighting and them running into Fangorn Forest. Yeah,
it's a very cool ability that he has to be able to decipher a hobbit lay here. Like of all things, like a hobbit lay here, and then he's like he's spinning around and he's like seeing like this. They were chased, and we see like small glimpses of like horses like trampling the ground and stuff. And anyway, it's a very cool ability. They follow them into Fangorn Forest. That is where we kind of break, and they shift the perspective back over to Merry and Pippin. So they're chased by this orc who just is not giving up. He doesn't even care about the mission to Isengard or whatever. He just wants to eat them or whatever he wants or whatever. Yeah. So they start climbing these trees, and then all of a sudden the trees wake up. It's an Ent, Treebeard, and he is A, one of the coolest characters in the movie, and B, thinks that they're orcs. Merry and Pippin.
Yeah, I like that sound that he makes, like Brarum.
Or something like that, yeah.
Was it Pippin's like, oh, the tree's talking, Merry, the tree's talking?
Don't encourage it.
And he's like, tree? I am no tree. I am an Ent. Treebeard's mine. And I always thought that was funny. I was like, he just called himself not a tree, but then his name is Treebeard.
Yeah. Well done. It's interesting. Like sometimes Tolkien was very, very good at like making really cool fantasy names, and sometimes his stuff was like super on the nose. In The Hobbit, there's a whole town called Lake Town because the town was on the lake, and it's just like sometimes his creative juices ran a little dry, but anyway, Treebeard is still pretty cool. I like the name Treebeard.
And then, like, the rest of the Ents, all their names were the names of different types of trees.
Yes. Yeah. What I liked, and I noticed about during this rewatch of The Two Towers, is the way that Treebeard talks. Obviously, he talks very slow, but it sounds like he's breathing while he's talking. So it's almost like, you know how you can, like, breathe in and also talk?
I am no.
Yeah, he's like
yeah, he's sucking in air as he's talking, and then he's breathing out air as he's talking. So it's almost like a constant like ebb and flow of whatever he however he communicates. It's pretty cool, but it's just like one of those effects that I noticed.
I am no tree. Roo-da-room.
Don't be hasty.
Don't be hasty, Master Henry.
But yeah, to figure out whether they're orcs or not, he brings them to the White Wizard.
Yes.
And they're kind of freaked out because they're like, oh wow, he's bringing us to Saruman.
Yeah,
That's
so
a bad
they
guy.
only know of one other White Wizard, rightly so, which is Saruman. So that's where we cut back to the trio, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn. And I love Legolas. Like throughout this movie and the next movie, he has like his eyesight is, because he's an elf, is just far greater than the other two companions.
Legolas, what do your elf eyes see?
Which is a funny line, because I saw a meme once where it was just like Legolas turning around and saying, where I come from, we just call them eyes. Like, why are you calling them elf eyes? But it's true, like, he's capable of seeing very, very far distances. And in this instance, he can see through the trees to the fact that the White Wizard approaches, and he kind of like preempts the party. And, you know, they're planning to take him on. Like, don't let him cast a spell or don't let him speak because he'll cast a spell on us. So the three of them in unison, like, turn to face him. You know, Legolas shoots an arrow or two. Gimli throws an axe at him, and Aragorn just kind of like raises his weapon. But the White Wizard deflects all of that, and Aragorn's weapon is like, it turns into like a searing iron or whatever.
Oh yeah, the effect in that moment is actually really cool because it's like it's really bright. They can't see who it is, and then the White Wizard starts speaking, and the effect was really cool because it sounds like Saruman.
Yes. Yeah, but it slowly shifts towards Ian McKellen instead of Christopher Lee.
Right.
Well done.
And then they realize that, okay, this doesn't seem like Saruman, so they're like, show yourself.
Happens to be good old Gandalf.
The White this time. Gandalf the White.
Yeah, and he starts explaining that, like, I survived through fire and water fighting the Balrog, and from the lowest lake to the highest peak or something like that, which just kind of just goes to show that, like, it was a prolonged fight. Like, they left the cavern and they were on top of the mountainside, and it was just a crazy fight that they ended up going through. And
yeah,
he somehow experienced like 1,000 lifetimes in moments.
Right. It's crazy the fight that they showed, because from the last time that we had seen him, he was falling down into this falling into this cavern, but then they were fighting up on this like mountaintop.
Yeah.
And then he also said that they fought like in like the lowest of places. Another interesting thing was that he's like, Gandalf. Oh yeah, that's what they used to call me. So clearly Gandalf the White isn't Gandalf per se, because I think that in the books they said you may still call me, or you may also call me Gandalf or something.
Yeah, so he's not necessarily the same person.
Right.
He still has those memories, but it's of another lifetime. I almost kind of picture it like the Doctor, like when he regenerates, he's not necessarily the same person, even though he shares the same memories of his past. This is just kind of like the evolution of the character. He becomes something greater. He levels up to a point where he's just on another tier now. So anyway, they leave Fangorn, and he whistles and calls for a horse, one of the Maras, one of the lords of all the horses.
Right, Shadowfax.
Yeah, and I love that Legolas is just like stunned by its beauty, because he recognizes that
it's a legendary horse.
Yeah.
And then Shadowfax I think is the leader of them too. And it's really cool. Yeah, that line that Legolas says is like, unless my eyes are cheated by some spell that cannot be one of the Maris, right?
Something like that, yeah. The writing in these movies is so good. So freaking good. So they end up taking that horse as well as the other two horses that were gifted by the Rohirrim. What were their names? Like Hasufel and Errol or something like that. They give those two horses to the three of them because their masters had died or whatever. Which, first of all, that's kind of cool that they know each other's horses' names. Like, that's how close these people were, and that's how close they are to their horses.
Right, and if you look at Rohan, and even when you get to Edoras, it looks like it's very, these people, obviously, they live off the land.
Yeah, they're very one with nature. They're earthy people.
Exactly. That's a good way to explain it. And it gives off that vibe, and I feel like their armor and just the way that their people are, like, they kind of give off a Viking influence. Just
totally.
They're just not like showing like pillaging and whatnot.
So I spent some time in Iceland like two years ago. And that was one of the coolest things, was that some of the older stuff or some of the more traditional styles felt like Rohan to me,
Nice.
Some of the patterns that they had made or carved or whatever was really cool because it felt very Lord of the Rings to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the landscape in certain areas looked very similar to Rohan and stuff. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Next stop, New Zealand.
Next stop. Yeah, because this was all filmed in New Zealand. It wasn't in Iceland. But the area looked similar-ish.
That's awesome. It's cool, though. Our boys, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, accompanied by Gandalf now, ride off on, they head over to Edoras. And Gandalf is in the know. He knows that Saruman has poisoned the mind of the king.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, don't look for welcome here.
Yeah, and Gimli's like, you'll find more cheer in a graveyard. And it's kind of true. Like, people are just kind of like standing, doing nothing, staring about. Yeah, so we enter Edoras.
The music for Rohan is actually like it like promotes that like earthy tone. Also, it's like very people that live on the land type thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite themes in all of the Lord of the Rings is the Rohan motif that we experience once they enter that land, and it's just so cool. All right, so they enter the throne room of Edoras, and before that, they're told not to,
that they can't go before the king so heavily armed.
Yeah, so
they have to give up their weapons, and so they do, and it's funny because I feel like Legolas and or Aragorn are like pulling all these like weapons out.
Yeah, Aragorn just keeps coming out with more knives and stuff, and it's just like, he would have that many weapons, wouldn't he? And the guy's like, I'm sorry, I need your staff. And oh, you wouldn't part an old man with it from his walking stick, would you? And he just kind of like shrugs, just like, whatever.
I know. Gandalf the Sly, really.
Yeah, seriously.
So yeah, they go in, and there's something that Gandalf says that like I really like about the what is it he says that kind of something in the veins of like the charm of his like halls isn't like it hasn't been good lately or whatever, but he didn't say charm, he said something else. So yeah, they go in, and they see Theoden there, an old sickly man, and Grima Wormtongue sitting next to him, and they approach.
Grima's talking to Saruman through Theoden, basically like the wizard approaches. Gandalf approaches.
Theoden says, "Why should I welcome you, Gandalf Stormcrow?" And when I remember like during one of my watches, I was like, Stormcrow, is he just like a person out of his mind, or is that like one of his names? And that really is one of Gandalf's names.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up really quick. How many names does Gandalf have? Because he has a lot of names.
Well, he did. How many lifetimes did he live through when he died?
1,000 lifetimes.
He has 1,000 lifetimes worth.
Yeah, so I'm looking it up. Gandalf acquired many names from the people he met whilst he was in Middle-earth. Olorin was his original name in Valinor, which is basically like their version of heaven. Mithrandir, his Sindarin name, which is the Elvish language. Then we have Incanus in Gondor, that's what they call him. I don't know if they use that in the movie. But then we have J.R. Tolkien several times changed his mind about the meaning of Incanus, blah, blah, blah. What else? He has a dwarf name named Tharkun that I don't think we hear in the movies. We have the White Rider, which we do hear.
Yeah.
We have Greyhaim, or Gandalf Greyhaim. That was one of his names in Rohan.
Yeah, you hear that.
Stormcrow was a name given to Gandalf by King Theoden. Lathspell, I name you, was what Grima Wormtongue says in the books. Yeah, so that's all his names. But that's a lot. The guy has a lot of names.
A lot of names.
A lot of names, yeah. That's pretty cool. Anyway, so Gandalf confronts them, you know? The trio of Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn like brawl some of the people inside the place so that Gandalf can have one-on-one conversation with Theoden, but really with Saruman. And I love that line, "You have no power here, Gandalf Greyhaim," or something like that.
Gandalf the Grey.
Yes.
And then he like pulls off that because he was hiding himself for the right time.
Yes. Basically, he wanted the big reveal. And
a big reveal it was.
And he's like, "Oh!"
Right? And it's funny because they take away all their weapons, but like Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas didn't need them. They just were beating down on all these people.
Yeah, they're highly skilled martial artists, basically.
Right. I love Gimli, like when he like steps on Grima. I would stay still if I were you.
Yes. Because, you know, Grima realizes what's about to happen. He's out. He's just a snake in the grass, man. He ends up showing to Saruman that he has transformed into Gandalf the White. And he basically releases, or he says that he's going to release Theoden of the spell. And Saruman's talking directly through Theoden at this point. Like, if I go, Theoden dies. And Gandalf's like, I call BS.
Right. He's like, you didn't kill me and you won't kill him.
Yeah. And so he frees Theoden, and it's one of like the more, I guess, heartwarming moments in the thing where he starts becoming himself again, and you start to see like his hair grow back, and
like the kind of like the veil is like pulled away, and like he's like there.
It's a good way to put that, actually. And perhaps your hands would remember their strength better if they grasp your sword. Yeah, it's a cool scene. And so they give him his sword, and he's just like, and then, you know, he's looking towards Grima like, you did this to me.
Yeah, that line that he says, your witchcraft would have me crawling on all fours like a beast.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And yeah, so he throws Grima out of Rohan at this point.
Right.
That's when he realizes. Sorry. Yeah, that's when he realizes that his son is no longer there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, that's when he like kind of like really like finds out, because he's like, "Where's my son?" They have a funeral. The language that Eowyn uses when she sings is like really interesting.
In the story of Lord of the Rings, it would have been in like ancient Rohirric, which was, you know, very very much based on like the Anglo-Saxon language and stuff. But Peter Jackson decided to use the actual Anglo-Saxon language, like in our real world, to make that song, you know, as powerful as it was. And, you know, I'm looking at like some people like debating whether or not he should have done that online. And some people believe that J.R.R. Tolkien would have approved of the use because that's what he based their English language, the common tongue on, was
Right.
the old Anglo-Saxon speech. And he was very familiar with that because he was a linguist himself. So it's cool how they merged that like real world language into the movie to give it a very fantasy feel and a very authentic feel.
And it really did.
It's one of the most powerful scenes, like single scenes in the trilogy, is this little funeral that they give to the son of a king. The actress who portrayed Eowyn nailed it, and you see the pain in her eyes and stuff as she's singing, and because this was a cousin of hers, I believe, that died.
Right. Yeah. Theoden is her uncle.
Right, so it would be her cousin.
Yeah, it's a powerful scene altogether, that funeral scene, because the actor that portrays Theoden like really displayed the grief really well when they were talking about the flowers that bloom on the graves.
Right.
And he's like, now it's gonna bloom on the grave of my son. And he said no parent should ever have to bury their child. And like he showed like the grief when he was crying it. He really like sold it.
You know, talk about powerful lines. Like you said, he sold it. And the idea that no parent should have to bury their children is something that is just, you know, unfortunately a commonplace thing, especially when it comes to warfare and stuff like that. That it's just a natural thing.
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen. It's sad, but you know it pushes the story forward from scene to scene. And what's great about the song, outside of all the stuff that I've already said, is the fact that the music, like the score, is like non-existent during that scene. It's entirely just her own singing carrying the moment.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing that they did for that.
Yeah, the music for these scenes and when they're in Rohan is like some of my favorite of the movie. They get together and they talk about how war is about to happen. You know, that Saruman is about to move his forces against Rohan. And they're trying to figure out what to do. Was it Aragorn or Gandalf that says, you know, ride out against them, you know, fight them? Theoden,
sounds like something Aragorn would say.
Right. Theoden is like, I would not risk open war against my people. Mm-hmm. And Aragorn says...
It's the start of that conversation, because it comes up a number of times, especially in the next movie, where they need to come to other people's aids, but they're not willing to because of old grudges that they have towards the other people's other.
Oh, right.
So it's kind of an interesting dialogue that becomes more important later on.
And so they settle on heading out to Helm's Deep.
Yes, which is an interesting choice, and because they realize that the armies are starting to take over the lands, you know, so they're like, we need to protect our people now by heading over to Helm's Deep so that we can hold them off if it comes to open warfare.
Right. Yeah. So like while these moments are happening in the background, there's Saruman who's raising up this huge army of Uruk-hai.
Yeah. And
so to like really like speed up process, he tells them. Christopher Lee has some amazing lines. He's really good at like playing a villain. Like, I'll tell you that. Like the Forest of Fangorn lies on our doorstep. Burn it.
And then the orc is like, yes.
Right. And then they take the people that are the like wild people that are exiled from the lands, and pretty much like sets them to, you know, go across the land, you know, pillaging and burning houses. And so people are running over. They're forced to essentially like move from their lands. We only have to remove those who oppose us.
Yeah, there's a great scene of a mother putting her two children on a horse and like telling them to ride off. knowing, at least in her heart, that she has no hope of surviving this interaction, and that all she can do is pray that her children arrive safely in Rohan or whatever.
Right, and they do. They make it to Adoras.
Right before everyone leaves.
Right before everybody leaves off to Helm's Deep. And as they're preparing, there's a moment between... and I actually, I love this moment between Aragorn and Brago, the horse, where he speaks Elvish to it to calm it down. It has PTSD. It was Theodred's horse, which is Theoden's son.
Yeah.
It was it was really cool because you see Aragorn, he's speaking to it calmly and speaking Elvish to it, which it helped out a lot. It calmed it down. And he said, and he tells them that the horse needs to be released. It's seen too much war. And Eowyn was super impressed, and she's like, I've heard about the magic of elves, but I've never looked for it in a ranger from the north. And this is where you find out that he was raised in Rivendell for a time, which is really cool. I like that moment. That scene is really cool.
The relationship between Aragorn and Eowyn is an interesting one, and we'll have to talk about that next week as it develops more. Speaking of the two children that were put on horseback, it was them showing up on Edoras' doorstep that prompted the discussion of them leaving because of war on their doorstep, Right,
yeah, because Gandalf is this is just a taste of what Saruman has in store, pretty much.
So I think that's all for their storyline on this disc. Jumping over really quickly to Merry and Pippin, we have them just kind of living life with the Ents, Or they haven't met any of the other Ents actually at this point. But they have started drinking the Ent drought, or the water that the Ents would drink, which helped them come to life in the first place.
Right.
And we have that funny scene of Merry growing a couple inches.
Right.
Or Pippin rather.
And then Mary's like, you just said something tree-ish.
I'm pretty sure that's the extent of everything that happens in these first this first volume of the Two Towers. Am I right?
Right. The next part really ramps up, and there's a lot that happens.
There's a lot of setup in this one, even though it's kind of still action packed and everything. This is a good spot to stop the discussion of this right here, because the next half of the film is the climax of the movie. So right. So just we didn't quite completely finish off on Frodo and Sam. So right before this first half ends, they see the Oliphants, yeah, and they see the evil men, and then that's when the Rangers attack them. Mm-hmm. They attack the evil men. At this point, we don't know why the Rangers are attacking these men on Oliphants, and what their goal is. But they end up capturing Frodo and Sam, and somehow Gollum gets away.
Right. So Gollum kind of tells them oh, these are evil men going to help Sauron. You hear the whistling of the Rangers, and Frodo kind of picks it up too, okay, what is that? Gollum, though, you see him sneaking away right before it happened, right before things start happening, and Frodo's Gollum or Smeagol, and then because he kind of dips out because I think he saw that there's people around. But that essentially ends the first half with them getting scooped up after that battle. That was a cool little battle right there.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll be discussing part 2 of the Two Towers next week.
So thank you guys so much for listening to us here at Project Geekology for our 30th episode. the third of our 6-part discussion of the fantastic Lord of the Rings film trilogy. Next week, Dakota and I will be jumping into part 2 of The Two Towers, so be sure not to miss out on our discussion, as well as the following 2 weeks, which we will be covering The Return of the King. Be sure to find all links to our show and socials in the show notes so you can keep up to date on all Project Geekology news and updates. If you enjoyed today's show, share it on social media, review it on your preferred podcast application, or talk to us directly online.
And don't forget, meat's back on the menu.
Meat is back on the menu, peeps.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.